All rise. Justice Court 7 is now in session. The Honorable Karen Haron-Bennett presiding.
Good morning, everybody. Please have a seat. We're gonna try this with this phone, but we don't have. Can you hear okay? Who's on the phone? Jennifer Abrams. Okay. All right, Ms. Abrams, and you represent who?
I represent Mr. Schoen and Mr. DiCiero, the adverse parties.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask them to enter their appearance for the record, and then you tell me if you can hear them, because you are some distance from them, and I don't have any other ability to do this telephonically than what we're doing now. So gentlemen,
Okay.
enter your appearance.
David Schoen, Your Honor. DiCiero. Good morning, Your Honor.
Okay,
And I'm Adam Breeden, Your Honor.
okay. Did you hear them?
Not very clearly. They do sound like they're at quite a distance. But if
Okay.
everyone articulates and speaks loudly, I should be fine.
You hear that, gentlemen? Okay, so, I'm gonna have the parties sworn in, and then we'll proceed.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Sir, please state your name for the record.
I'm Adam Breeden.
And your name, sir?
David Schoen.
And your name?
DiCiero.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, Mr. Breeden, if you could tell us, as succinctly as possible why we're here. You filed an application.
Yeah, Your Honor, I have some prepared statements, and if you give me some latitude to go through them here. I am a candidate for district court judge this year. I do hope the court takes seriously allegations of physical threats, intimidation, and extortion
Mr.
of candidates
Breeden,
for
with all
public
due
office.
respect, I need you to just kind of get to the point, okay? So I recognize, I've read your application. We're here on a TPO application that can only deal with stalking and harassment as defined by the statute. So I need to know what allegations you're making that these gentlemen have engaged in that.
After I interviewed as a political candidate for a group that apparently the adverse parties disagree with, what I can only describe as a campaign of harassment and extortion and physical threats against me began. The first thing that I saw was on my way home from this interview, and it was actually a post that somehow my Facebook accounts were tagged in, and it was Mr. DiCiero making a statement to the point he's going to get fucked up. Now, that's since been edited or deleted, but I saw it. And as I read forward, I saw comments from Mr. Schoen in the same little chain saying that I had messed up, that I had been warned, and now I was a target. And Your Honor, I don't know if someone walked up to you and said, you know, you messed up, you were warned, you're our target now, you're going to get fucked up. I don't know how anybody would take that other than physical threats and intimidation. After I went home and began documenting this, I did receive another email caused by the adverse parties, which contained a list of demands and a deadline by which I had to take certain actions where the adverse parties would begin to make statements about me that were provably false and defamatory. Of course, this is criminal extortion, and their efforts to physically harass and intimidate me violate different criminal laws as well, including election interference laws. After later documenting the threats, which I took very seriously, I began taking safety measures by locking my office all the time, alerting my staff of the threats, and filing a police report. I've taken other steps to protect my safety, which I do not wish to explain publicly, so these measures cannot be circumvented.
I've read
by
your
the adverse
application,
parties.
so I know that you have detailed that, but I'm still trying to understand the physical threats or the stalking and harassment. What are you expressly talking about? Because there is a distinction to be made here. You're in the midst of a campaign. I believe these gentlemen represent a political PAC, a political action committee. And so criticism and sometimes unkind comments are going to be made in that context. And I don't have jurisdiction to deal with that. So you are, I mean, I'm just looking at when your physical safety has been threatened, what you're considering to be stalking and harassment in connection with that, those threats of physical safety.
Even while this TPO is pending, Mr. Schoen's wife has continued to contact me and
Well, you
say
don't have a
threatening
pending
things.
TPO right now, you
That-
have an application.
That's correct, but the adverse parties also can't try to violate orders or do things through
There's no
surrogates.
order, there's
That's
no
correct.
order in place right now, so,
I'll also let you know that over the weekend, I had an incident at my house where somebody turned off fuses, a fuse box of the exterior of my personal residence while I was inside. I can tell you that those were not tripped electronically, they were manually shut off. I did think that this was an effort immediately to lure me outside, to ambush me. I will tell you that I was armed when I went outside. I didn't find anyone out there, but I can tell you that those were switched off manually, and then someone ran off, I guess. I highly suspect this is this group. They have a long history of harassment and intimidation. I know that 2 other people have come to the court, especially regarding Mr. DiCiero, who's a troubled individual who, by his own admission, has had problems with drugs and alcohol in the past.
Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to object to this line of statements. First of all, it's outside of what he included in his application. And second of all, I think he knows that unless he has personal knowledge of any of these things, he shouldn't be presenting to the court things that are A, hearsay, and B, character assassination, which under the rules are not appropriate under these circumstances.
Mr. Breeden, one more time, I think what we're trying to get at is, you've applied for a temporary protective order. Under the statute, you have to define what you're considering to be stalking and harassment as prohibited by the statute. I realize that you have a lot of expectations for what could happen, maybe one day might happen, but I can't make a ruling based on that. So do you have some specific instances where these gentlemen have engaged in the practice that you're applying for protection from?
Judge, I've told you, and to be honest with you, it troubles me a little bit that you don't seem to be taking this TPO seriously.
An absolute decree of divorce is granted.
By September 6th, you will pay $6,000 of what is due.
Best interest is not, can you give her a pony?
To ask the question, make sure we're being accurate with what the doctor states.
To find out what the facts were. I agree, the record's a mess.
I make a finding that paternity has been established.
was a potential danger to his children.
You don't seem to be taking this TPO seriously. These are men who are in the business of cyberbullying, harassment, and intimidation, and they have done this on a massive scale to candidates. They've clearly violated laws by making physical threats against candidates. They clearly are continuing.
But you want this to be a referendum on what they're doing in terms of their political action committee. That's not my function here. And regardless of what you think I'm taking seriously, what I'm taking seriously are the rules and the extent to my jurisdiction. I don't have jurisdiction over anything involving Facebook and Google, and all those things would have to be applied for in district court. You're running for a district court office, you should know that. And so what I'm dealing with is what I can deal with, which is the allegations of stalking and harassment. So I need you to pinpoint for me, not your projections, not what you think might have happened, what you think might happen, the thing that you don't like them criticizing you. I understand, but it's not something that I can prohibit.
It's not criticism, Judge.
Okay.
It's the definition of extortion. When you give someone a list of demands and a deadline, otherwise you will begin making false statements about them. Those are not
The
political
extortion
statements.
issue, sir, needs to be presented to the proper law enforcement officials. We're talking about stalking and harassment. So tell me what you think they've done that qualifies as that.
I have outlined the physical threats. I
Okay.
have outlined this mysterious event at my home, which I believe the adverse parties were behind.
Okay.
I can tell you there are
Your
numerous
Honor, I'm
other
going to
people.
object to that statement. First of all, it wasn't in his application, and I understand he's saying it just happened, but that he has offered zero evidence that this even occurred, and absolutely zero evidence that it had anything to do with my clients. And to bring it up at the last minute without any specific identification and specification of exactly what he's alleging that they've done, and the opportunity to respond to it, I'm going to object to any suggestion when he has no evidence, no proof, nothing, and not even specificity as to what he's talking about, to bring that up at this point.
Okay, so, Mr. Breeden, if I just to reiterate what you have what you're considering to be stalking and harassment, you're talking about the response to your interview with veterans in politics, that you fucked up, that you made a huge mistake, and that they're going to target you. Those are the things that you're considering to be stalking and harassment.
Yes, I took those as very serious physical threats against me,
Okay,
and I believe they were intended in that manner.
okay. All right, thank you very much. You want to have a seat, and I'll hear from the adverse parties now. Mr. DiCiero?
Your Honor, would you like a statement from me, or would you like?
I would like to respond.
Okay.
You'd like to?
First of all, as a preliminary matter,
Mhm.
Mr. Breeden brought up that he was contacted by Julie Schoen, and I just want to put this on the record. The reason that he was contacted by Julie Schoen, who is Mr. David Schoen's wife, is because she learned from a Facebook post that Mr. Breeden's paralegal tested positive for COVID-19. He filed what she believes, and she's entitled to her opinion, and quite frankly, I think I share that opinion, a frivolous TPO application, and forced Mr. Schoen and Mr. DiCiero to show up in a courtroom with him when his paralegal has tested positive for COVID-19. They have people who are at high risk, and they have young children in their families. And her question...
You know what,
to
Ms.
him
Abrams? Ms. Abrams, I'm gonna cut you off here
Yes.
because you're doing the same thing that you have objected to on the part of Mr. Breeden. And here's the reality. If you were concerned about your clients appearing, they certainly had the wherewithal to file a motion to continue today's hearing to be heard on the telephone, the way you're being heard. I mean, they had a lot of options and they apparently have decided to be here. So I'm not gonna get into this whole historical issue that you all seem to have going on here, which makes very little sense to me. I'm just really concerned about the allegations of physical harm and stalking and harassment, as I've stated to Mr. Breeden. And I'm gonna hear from your clients unless you're telling them that you don't want them to say anything to them.
Well, and I'd like to address that as well. The only reason I brought up the issue was because he mentioned it and I was just trying to provide a response. But there's really two issues before this court. Whether Mr. Breeden met the standard for the issuance of a protective order and whether Mr. Breeden initiated this action to chill Mr. Schoen and Mr. DiCiero's rights of free speech.
Okay, well,
And
the only
the
thing
first-
that is at issue is whether or not I'm going to grant the temporary protective order. The other issues you can take care of in another forum. So we're
Okay.
dealing with whether, there is no TPO issued as of yet. There was an application filed, your clients filed a review, or whoever filed the motion to dismiss that application. The appropriate thing would be for me to deny the application. And at this point, I'd just like to hear the other side.
And I would like to address this on behalf of my client.
Okay?
So going through the allegations that were made by Mr. Breeden, he is a political candidate. He admits as much in his application. Unlike a private citizen minding their own business outside the public view, Mr. Breeden placed himself in the public view by running for a seat in district court. And with our system of electing judges, this is definitionally a matter of interest and importance to the public. And Mr. Schoen and Mr. DiCiero, who run a political action committee, have every right to make political commentary in opposition to Mr. Breeden's candidacy. Mr.
Okay,
Breeden,
can I just stop you
these
right
are the
there?
allegations he makes.
No, I realize that, ma'am, if I could just ask you a question in response to what you just said. There is an allegation that one of the assertions against Mr. Breeden, the initial threat, if you will, what he's calling a threat to his physical safety, was made to his personal, not his campaign Facebook site. Do you have any response to that?
I do. He claims that Mr. Schoen shared a link to his personal, not to his campaign Facebook site. That is actually a false statement, and it is proven false by the attachments to his own application. If you look at the exhibit, there wasn't a link to his personal Facebook site. There was a screenshot of his personal Facebook site, which is available to the public. Anybody can look it up. And what that screenshot shows is the words, elect Adam Breeden. So that is political. He put on his personal site, elect Adam Breeden, and that has to do with his candidacy. The link was a link to his Facebook site that dealt with his candidacy, his political Facebook site. So his allegations in that regard are incorrect. But at the end of the day, he has his Facebook site open to the public. It's open to public view, and there's nothing illegal, threatening, or illicit about taking a screenshot of a Facebook page that says elect Adam Breeden and posting it with a link to his political Facebook site. Nowhere in there would any reasonable person conclude that that is a threat to his personal safety.
What about the admonitions about you've been warned, you're now a target, you fucked up? Those three, I think, specific verbiages are referenced in the application.
I'm happy to address each one. Mr. Breeden is a judicial candidate who aligns himself with an organization that has been found by Judge Duckworth to engage in the business of judicial corruption. The post is on a Nevada Court Watchers Facebook page. This is a page where people discuss in a public forum issues of political significance and of public interest. You done messed up Adam is not a physical threat, and I don't think any reasonable person could conclude that those words are a physical threat. In fact, when you take them in candidate who has aligned himself with an organization that has been found by a judge, a sitting district court judge, to engage in political corruption. That is a mess up. That is a mess up both in the public view as well as the canons under the Code of Judicial Conduct that applies to candidates for judicial office.
What about the
Has Mr.
targeting?
Breeden-
What about the targeting
I'm sorry?
threat? What about the targeting threat that Mr.
The
Breeden
reference
took?
to,
He took that as a personal threat.
well, he took that completely out of context. The word target was part of a larger sentence. The reference to being a target was a political target to inform the public of his alignment with an organization that has been found to engage in judicial corruption. So taking that word out of context is inappropriate. And honestly, if you look at the word target, it is not a threat. It is not something that someone could interpret as a threat to his personal safety. It doesn't say, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to break your legs, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to destroy your property, I'm going to light your house on fire. It is
But
a
Ms. Abrams,
target.
with all due respect, I think the underlying issue as presented by this application is not what is said overtly, but what is the subliminal intention behind those threats. And what Mr. Breeden seems to be arguing is that this political action committee is really just a ruse to attack him and to engage in physical threats and stalking against him. That this is really not a genuine concern for the election issue. It's more just a way it's kind of being misappropriated to use against him personally. I think that's the subliminal suggestion that he's making.
Well, he can try to make that suggestion, but he has absolutely no evidence of that. And in a system where we elect our judges, the campaigns and the information and informing the public about the judicial candidates is the exact type of speech that our First Amendment is intended to protect.
Is it also intended to protect the threat of making false statements regarding his involvement in tax fraud and all kinds of other activities that
There
he
is
has no connection with?
There is absolutely nowhere in any of these communications or posts at all that says that they're going to make false statements about Mr. Breeden, not one. If he can point to one place where there has been a statement by my clients that they're going to make false statements about Mr. Breeden, then I would say that maybe he has a point.
May I ask
There
again,
is
how do you interpret the reference to the campaign of, I believe her name is, I think it's spelled S-Y-C-K or something like that? She was a candidate for a judicial office, and there were some posts made about her that I guess were made in retaliation to her support or camaraderie with
I
the
don't
veterans.
believe any posts have been made in retaliation to her. My understanding is that no such posts have been publicized at all at this point in time. First of
So,
all,
did
and
you
second
see
of all-
that it was attached to the application? There was let me see if I can find it and I can reference that to you. And I'm asking these questions, I think, you're answering them, but I don't know if you're completely aware of everything that was provided. Let me make sure. There is, gentlemen, are you all aware of what I'm talking about?
There's a page that looks like this.
Right. Let me get it to you. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing the woman's name. Yeah, here it is.
I think it's pronounced Zick.
Right, it's S-Z-Y-C, and it follows the, I guess, the email or something that went to Mr. Breeden from Nevada Court Watchers regarding veterans in politics interview. And then there's a reference here, it says, we warned Lisa Zick against associating with Steve Sanson, she looked the other way. And then on the second page, which is referenced as 2 out of 4, there are 3 posts that are referenced. One that says tax fraud, one that says backs domestic abusers, and one that says for sale. So the thing I'm asking you about is this issue of tax fraud, which I believe was something that I guess was inferred could be alleged against Mr. Breeden again.
Well, it doesn't say that, first of all, it doesn't say that those will be posted against Mr. Breeden. Those are examples. The second thing is that these are based on association with an organization that has committed tax fraud, association with an organization where their leader has been found to be a domestic abuser, association with an organization that has been found to engage in judicial corruption, which is the for sale
I realize that, but are you suggesting that
those
those?
have not actually been posted. Those are just examples. And it doesn't say that we're going to post these particular things about you. It just says that there will be a campaign to inform the public of your association with an organization that has engaged in tax fraud, in domestic abuse,
Right, but
and in judicial corruption.
But none of these posts say that. None of the, and in your words, you're suggesting that I hold Mr. Breeden to a very overt interpretation of what is being written. These posts imply that this woman herself is guilty of tax fraud. I don't know, she went to one party and now you're saying she backs a domestic abuser and she's for sale. So while I realize that it doesn't overtly say we'll do this to you, I don't understand the inference of giving it to him at all unless you wanted him to see that what could be done. So one of your clients is standing up now. What's your name?
David Schoen, Your Honor.
Mr. Schoen, what is it that you want me to know?
I just want to clarify for those 3 posts.
Okay, thank you.
Those 3 posts, it's difficult to see in the exhibits attached by Mr. Breeden.
It is.
But at the top of them, the caption for those posts say, for example, the first one that says tax fraud says that Lisa Sizik, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, it said something to the effect of associates with an organization that has lied to the IRS and has failed to file tax returns and has her picture next to tax fraud.
Right.
So the message is necessarily about her association with veterans in politics. Under backs domestic abusers, the caption read something to the effect of, he threw his pregnant wife into a military-style safe and caused her placenta to partially detach. Now she wants his support. That reference to Steve Sanson, who previously threw his wife into a military-style safe, causing her placenta to partially detach. The connection between the two in the photograph is her association with Steve Sanson. When you go to the final post where it says for sale, this is a direct connection, and the caption says something to the effect of Steve Sanson or veterans in politics being in the business of judicial corruption, and her being the next target for next time he needs a favor in court. When you look at the campaign as a whole, of course the photograph looks damaging. It's a negative campaign. Negative campaigns are intended to be that way. That's part of politics. But when you look at the message and you look at what's being pushed as a whole, the gist of it is not necessarily that Ms. Sizik or that she committed tax fraud, or that she personally encourages domestic violence, or that she has a for sale sign in front of every campaign billboard. It's her association with organizations and her support for organizations that have been found to do that. And when you look at the recent case
I'm not gonna debate with you about what this is or isn't in terms of political free speech and whether or not it's protected, but what I will suggest is there is concern as to why you would reference this particular form of activity when you disagreed with someone for going to an interview. Now, you have the right as a political action committee to say whatever it is you want to say about someone as long as it's genuinely made in good faith and truth and so forth. But what you don't have the right to do is to use that political action committee to kind of bolster a threat against his safety and well-being, and that's what we're really here about. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's what he's suggesting, is that, yeah, it's all dressed up in a bow as political, back and forth, but the real deal is these people want to hurt me, physically, personally, individually, not as a judicial candidate, but just as an individual. And I'm concerned that I need some layers of protection between me and them.
And I understand that, Your Honor, and I'm happy to answer those questions. First, to be clear, with the exception of this work, for the first time in this courtroom, I'm face-to-face with Adam Breeden. I have never spoken with him on the phone before in my life. I've never had a conversation with him. I didn't even know he existed until he filed for public office, until he decided to show up to the interview for Steve Sampson. I have no personal ill will towards him whatsoever. My issue is...
So this issue about something happening at his house the other day and...
I have no idea where he lives. I have no idea where he works. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I could Google it and find out, but I have no interest in that. My interest is purely political. My goal, everything that I've said in in the context of this application and the speech that surrounds it, deals with one thing. My goal to make sure that he does not sit where you're sitting. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm not threatening him personally. I'm not levying any allegations or going and shutting off his power at home or calling him on his cell phone or harassing him in any way. My speech is 100% political. It has nothing to do with him personally. I have no ill will towards him. Frankly, if you look at the email that was sent to him following the Veterans in Politics interview, we gave him an out from this free speech political campaign. We said, look, reject this endorsement and we don't go after you. We don't do anything. And going after you in the context of a political campaign is completely allowed. There's nothing else there. I have no interest other than spending my time and resources to make sure he
Now,
doesn't
there
take
is
advantage.
one other allegation that bothered me that neither of you talked about, but there is some assertion that he thought you might dox him to reveal his personal, his private residence and so forth. Is that something that you're engaged in?
Absolutely not, Your Honor, and I'll be very clear with this. I was a political candidate last cycle for state assembly. I ran a six-figure campaign. I understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of negative campaigns. I follow, and I'll speak for Mr. DiCiero, but he can say it himself. We follow the unwritten rule when it comes to political speech, that kids and family are off limits. I have no interest in letting people know where he lives. I have no interest in knowing where he lives. That doesn't bother me at all, or concern me at all. My focus is purely political. There's nothing about trying to harass him, intimidate him personally, or make him feel that he's physically threatened in any way whatsoever. I haven't gotten a speeding ticket in 12 years. I'm a upstanding citizen who follows the law and exercises my free speech as the Constitution allows me to. And that's the extent of what I'm doing here in this campaign and the speech that Mr. Breeden has an issue with.
Mr. DiCiero, did you have anything you wanted to add before we close this out?
Very little, Your Honor. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have. The one thing I would like to address is the allegation that one of the comments to Mr. Breeden was along the lines of, you're going to be effed up.
Right, you're gonna be effed up, you're gonna be targeted, and he took those to mean personal.
Well, first of all, that was never sent from me. I understand what he's saying is that the post was edited to say something different after the fact. I don't speak that way. Like Mr. Schoen, I don't know Mr. Breeden. I have no interest in harming him, of knowing where he lives. This fuse incident, like Mr. Schoen, I have no idea what he's talking about. This is politics. And I'm going to suggest that, a bruising of the ego, I don't know that Mr. Breeden is up for this if the comments from us are getting underneath his skin. But Your Honor, I do need to make it very clear. I did not say that Mr. Breeden was going to be effed up or harmed. I think the comment, I believe you have it in front of you, was big mistake, huge, with a bunch of views.
It was amended to read big mistake, huge, but initially, I think the initial verbiage was something about being fucked up.
I don't think it was, Your Honor. I never said that. Has he attached proof in that regard? I don't have the application in front of me.
Did you? Brian?
That's what I saw, Your Honor. They've edited or deleted and replaced.
Right.
And if I may point out, Your Honor, if you look at the motion, the special motion to dismiss under anti-S.L.A.P.P, the exhibits to that, I believe we actually attached a screenshot of that specific post that shows
did.
no edit history.
Right. You did.
Your Honor, I did not make that
Your
comment.
Honor, it takes 2 seconds to take a screenshot when someone sees something. The fact that Mr. Breeden has absolutely no evidence of this post being there, and he says there was an edit, and we've provided the edit history showing that there was no edit to this post, it's just not true.
Okay.
He just has no evidence whatsoever that any such thing happened.
Okay. Noted, but I'm listening to both, I'm trying to listen to everybody, okay? So yes, sir.
Is there anything specific I can answer for Your Honor?
No, I think, unless you want to address the issue that Mr. Breeden brought up about the potential to dox some personal information that would put his family at risk.
Absolutely not. I have a family myself. I'm a single dad. I love my daughter more than life itself. I'm not interested in that. This is political speech. Politics is not pretty at times. Mr. Breeden should know that. It sounds to me that he doesn't. Nobody wants to harm him. He's not being stalked. He is not in, there's no risk of harm or danger to Mr. Breeden or his family. Not from our group anyway, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Breeden?
Well, Your Honor, I'll try to be brief, but there's a cadre of people who can testify that the opposite is true, that these men are simply cyber bullies engaged in constant harassment and intimidation of people.
Are we talking about in the context of political campaigning?
Political and non-political.
Okay, so I'm only interested in that which you consider to be non-political, because political may very well exceed what we're doing here. So, and if you have someone who's here to testify, let me know. Otherwise, I need you to talk about your own experiences.
Yeah, so there is another political candidate, Yvette Chevalier Lopez, who's available to testify by phone today about the campaigns of harassment and intimidation against her, because she also met with this veterans group contrary to the adverse party's intention. I also attached to my TPO application.
Non-political, Mr. Breeden, I need to hear about non-political activity that you think is outside. Because here's what, I don't know, have you run before? Have you run
No.
political campaigns?
No, and I understand. People can say truthful things about your campaign.
And they
But
also can take exception to some of the people who endorse you. I mean, that is a common practice. It has been going on since the beginning of time. You know, candidates that are supported by unions. There's another group of people who don't like the fact they think you're bought and paid for by the union. Then there are people who get money from the casinos. They say you're bought and paid for by the casinos. This is a common thing that has been going on. What I suspect is happening right now is because of the presence of social media and its dominance right now during this quarantine period. You're concerned about that having more prominence in people's mindset than maybe it would normally when we were out and going to rallies and town halls and finding out about, and candidate forums, finding out on our own. And so, but the reality is that is a common, you know, hey, he's bought and paid for by the casinos, by the this, by the that, depending upon who that person is supported by and whether or not that group thinks those are good people or not. So that's not unusual.
Well, that's accusing me of participating in bribery. I've never received $1 from veterans in
But I don't think
politics, or
anybody
vice
has,
versa.
I don't think anybody has accused you of that.
Well, they certainly said they would run these ads. They're demonstrably false.
They said, look at what happened, and I agree that there is an inference that there could be some not in good faith language attached to those ads, but that hasn't happened.
They said, you give in to our demands or you're gonna get fucked up and we're gonna run these false ads about you.
That wasn't
And
said,
that's
Your Honor.
crossing a line.
Okay, so go to the people who enforce that law, but this is about personal harassment and stalking. This is not about, you know,
I agree.
extortion and all kinds of other breaches of criminal law. This is a TPO that you engaged to see if you can get protection for your person against stalking and harassment. So I, again, will caution you to stay in that lane.
And just because I'm a candidate for office does not mean that I check my physical safety at the door. And I can tell you there have been other applications where Mr. DiCiero's ex-wife raised serious concerns about him.
Your Honor, I
And a
don't
long
think the same
TPO
objection,
application.
first of all, there was no application, and second of all, he's referring to an application that was denied.
And
Well,
there's a-
and that's okay, because I know that, and that doesn't have anything to do with this anyway. You have a completely different relationship with this gentleman than she does, so we're not gonna talk about that.
Well, there's just another member of the community, Amy Hanley, that Mr. Deere, she sought a TPO against Mr. DiCiero. I couldn't tell whether it had been granted or not. They're saying it was denied. But I'll tell you, often the first people to raise alarms about troublesome people aren't believed. They aren't paid attention.
Your Honor,
Well,
same
the
objection.
reality is, let me just say this, and I appreciate that, Ms. Abrams, but let me caution you, because you're making some pretty sweeping insinuations that I am taking offense to at this point. This is not about whether or not people are believing you. This is whether or not you have substantiated your application to say that you have been victimized under the statute for which this TPO will be governed for stalking and harassment. That's what your responsibility is. You're not to be, you can't come in here and talk about what bad guys these guys are. You gotta talk about what they did to you that warrants a TPO. And if you don't do that, then your application is gonna be denied.
Well, I think their pattern that they have against other people or other people that are very concerned about their activity is relevant to this procedure. But, Your Honor, I would just say in closing, the adverse parties did physically threaten me. They tried to intimidate me. They tried to extort me by threatening me at running these ads. They have no legitimate reason to be contacting me or approaching my home or office. They have no legal right to publish false or defamatory information about me because I did not give in to their demands. I ask that you tell them today that they're not above the law, that you protect my well-being and physical safety, and that you issue the protective order.
Thank you very much,
Your
Mr.
Honor.
Breeden. Yes, Ms. Abrams.
May I just point out, Exhibit 1 to Mr. Breeden's TPO application tells this court everything we need to know. And that is the police report that he filed.
Right.
And what he put in the police report, in the narrative, it says, Adam believes that Nevada court watchers will publish ads against him due to seeking VIPI endorsement. That is what he complained about. He didn't complain in his police report that he was afraid of his physical safety. That shows up in the TPO application. But his police report specifically says he doesn't want Nevada court watchers to publish ads against him. And in his TPO application request, he's asking the court to prohibit Mr. Schoen and Mr. DiCiero from posting anything regarding him on their page. And that is clearly not someone who's afraid of anything other than criticism in his candidacy. And what he just said now about approaching my home or my office, that is not anywhere in his TPO application. It's not anywhere in the police report that he filed. He's bringing those things up now because he's seeing that he doesn't have anything to support his application for an order against stalking, aggravated stalking or harassment.
Your Honor, I just want to very briefly say that's untrue. My complete statement to the police, which outlines the physical threats against me, are made here. I can't control what the officer typed up or how he typed it up. My complete statement, which was
Well,
3
we're
pages.
gonna leave it to the, let me just tell you, Mr. Breeden, I'm gonna leave that to the police to investigate and do what it is they think they are entitled to do, if anything, regarding what you've submitted to them. But with regard to this application, I'm gonna order that it be denied. I'm not convinced that a temporary protective order should be issued in this case. I will admonish both of you, I get it, political season is one of those times when everybody thinks hands and gloves off. This can go and get muddled into something that wasn't intended to be on both sides, so please, conduct yourselves responsibly. But I am not in a position to prohibit free speech in a political campaign that may or may not be criticism or ugly or unjust or whatever. You gotta fight back and let people know who you are. I mean, that's part of being a political candidate. They are gonna reach out and contact you based on what you put on your application and when you submitted it to the Department of Elections, that's made public. And whether or not you respond to it is certainly your choice and the choice of your campaign, but in this instance, I have not seen any evidence of any personal harassment in our stalking as defined by the statute, and so your application is going to be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, there's a pending special motion to dismiss for anti-S.L.A.P.P. Do you want me to brief that and set a hearing on it, or do you want to?
You know what, I don't even, I wondered about that because I don't believe that I have this was done in the context of the application for the temporary protective order. And as I said in my opening statement to you, this should have been at best a motion to deny the application. This motion to dismiss for all that, you all have to carve that out in another forum, but that will not be addressed in this forum, okay?
If I can respond to that, Your Honor,
Sure.
briefly. Typically, I would agree with you. However, in this circumstance, the anti-S.L.A.P.P. statute is very clear about what type of action those statutes apply to. And this type of action, which is the intent, it's based on a good faith communication and the furtherance of right to free speech, and him trying to take action to silence that. This is an appropriate action to deal with anti-S.L.A.P.P.
His application, even though I know you all don't agree with what he said, his application talks specifically about personal threats. Now, whether you think they were or weren't, he did try to take it out of that. And I have really made my decision based upon that, because that's all I've looked at.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand, Your Honor. My only concern with that is obviously the anti-S.L.A.P.P. statutes afford additional protections to us as defendants. If the court were to make a ruling on it. Second, when you talk about the context of, when this court talks about the context of personal threats, those allegations of personal threats were peppered in throughout an entire rant talking about his political candidacy. It was, if you look at his TPO application, it says, as a political candidate, as a political candidate, as a political candidate. That's exactly what this is. And so Your Honor, I haven't interrupted him. Can you please ask me not to interrupt him?
He's arguing on his own behalf. He's arguing the motion.
He's trying to convince me to make a ruling on the motion.
Well, you couldn't do that
Ms.
today
Abrams?
anyway.
Right, Ms. Abrams, did you want to interject here?
Well, if the court, if you are not going to entertain the anti-S.L.A.P.P. motion, then we just need your order to reflect that you decline to entertain it, and we will take it up. If you do wish to entertain it, then I'm happy to argue that issue.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think I need to reach that, to be honest with you. I understand you want the added protection, but I think it would be more appropriate for you to address in a different forum. I think the issue, I was very clear with everybody from the beginning that this was going to be narrowly interpreted with regard to the harassing and stalking prohibitions under the TPO jurisdiction that I'm granted. And that's what I think I'm going to stay within that boundary. Anything else that may come up with you all, I get it. It may have to come up and be addressed in a wider issue, but this issue was about him making allegations against you all that you were personally going to hurt him, personally, his physical safety, and I don't find there's been sufficient evidence of that, so that's gonna be what my order, and I will make reference to your motion in my final order, that I decline to entertain those issues, okay?
And I appreciate that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Obviously, my concern with that is, when we have, the whole reason we're drugging here is because of our actions that are purely political. I understand Mr.
You
Breeden's
want me to
allegations.
make that determination, and I'm just saying that they don't threaten him personally,
I understand that, Your Honor.
okay?
And, Your Honor, I just want to make clear that
Justin, can you get that?
I would have filed a written opposition to the motion and appeared to argue against it if the court entertained it, but my understanding is it's not going to.
I understand, and it probably, I'm trying to make sure I can get you an order before you leave, so you don't have to keep all of us. You have to go. I'm gonna have to add something else. Okay, so, let's see. today's date is the 7th, okay. Okay, if you all just are patient enough to wait, we can file this in open court. And you all can each get a, if you want certified copies of the order, you can feel free to request them and receive them before you leave today. Is there anything else?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you to you and your staff for appearing in person during these crazy COVID-19 times. Stay
No,
healthy. Stay healthy.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much. All right, they'll get those orders to you guys.